we move on to Iran. As per reports, we are now learning about the tragic gas explosion at a residential building in Iran's Khuzestan province, where at least 4 people have been confirmed dead. The explosion caused by gas leak occurred in a 4-unit building in the provincial capital, or Ahvaz. Firefighters and rescue teams have been deployed to the scene, carefully removing debris to search for any other potentially trapped individuals. The incident is under investigation. Now we stay in Iran. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has blamed U.S. President Donald Trump, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and European leaders for fueling the recent unrest in Iran. President Pezeshkian has accused foreign powers of exploiting Iran's economic struggles and encouraging protests. He has said that they sought to create division, instigate violence, and tear the nation apart. The president has emphasized that protests are legitimate, but violence and destruction, like attacks on military forces and the burning of ambulances and bazaars, are not acceptable. He has added that Iran is willing to listen to its people and address their concerns, but foreign interference only worsens the situation. Let's listen in.
چه نتانیاهو چه اروپایی‌ها همه به دنبال این بودن که تحریک بکنن، تفرقه ایجاد بکنن و تجهیز کردن و یه عده مردم بیگناه رو با این جریان همراه کردن و ریختن تو خیابونا و تهییج میکردن که باید این مملکت رو همان گونه فرمودن تیکه تیکه کنن، دعوا و نفرت بین مردم ایجاد کنن، تفرقه درست کنن. در هیچ اعتراض معمولی اجتماعی تفنگ به دست نمیگیرن و آماده ایم گوش بدیم، آماده ایم با اونا، وظیفمونه با اونا بشینیم و مشکلات رو حل کنیم. اما همه میدونن مسئله فقط اعتراض اجتماعی نبود، سوار بر مشکلات ما شدن، تحریک کردن و به دنبال این بودن و به دنبال این هستن که جامعه رو شقه شقه کنن. و حضور رهبری و وجود نازنین ایشون و نگاه‌هایی که وجود داره این توطئه ها رو همیشه خنثی کرده و خنثی خواهد کرد.
Now we welcome Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee. She's a former Indian ambassador, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this, Iran seems to be blaming other nations like US and Israel instead of blaming themselves or taking responsibility for this protests that took place. So how is this benefiting this government while blaming outsiders?
Well, in the first instance, the government of Iran should understand that if it was a real democracy, they should listen to the voice of the people who are protesting against price rise, inflation, water crisis, and a host of other issues connected with development, quite apart from issues that the women face with regard to the violation of their human rights. But there is also no doubt that the Americans particularly have tried to meddle in these demonstrations and have tried to put pressure on the Iranian government not to crack down too sharply. They have succeeded to a certain extent by being able to stop some scheduled executions, which is of great relief. But if a foreign power beyond a point, for instance, moves a huge armada and says to the Iranian government that you better negotiate, otherwise it's going to be very tough for you. Most countries that have been under colonial rule, and that includes India, are extremely sensitive to perceptions of foreign intervention and pressure. Actually, such kinds of open and overt foreign intervention, in my perspective, makes a bad situation worse. To a certain extent, it is successful that the crackdown has decreased, the executions have not taken place, the demonstrations are much more subdued, and what would be ideal would be if the Iranian government could open up a dialogue and interaction with those who are demonstrating and work out a via media which is good for the people of Iran, etc. It would appear to me that Iran's rulers are out of touch with their people, and they think that violent crackdown on democratic protests is one way of keeping the pressure down. It never works. It's like a pressure cooker. The more it boils inside and you hold the lid down, it's bound to explode. That is what the Iranians should work out on their own. But on the other hand, the kind of overt pressure that President Trump is bringing on the Iranian regime, I fear may result in an open conflict. It could result in the Straits of Hormuz getting closed, which would affect global oil prices and global supplies. And it could actually have very dangerous consequences for international peace and security. So I'm trying to put it in a perspective that beyond a point, this kind of pressure, which has got nothing to do with the demonstrations, because he wants Iran, Trump wants Iran to give up its nuclear weapons program, etc., etc. But that is not the way to bring Iran to the bargaining table. He should go through the UN and start an UN process to negotiate with Iran, as indeed his predecessors did. And there was a process, and there was an agreement, which actually the Americans walked out of. So I am actually very concerned at the evolving situation in Iran, and it has implications for India, serious implications for India, not to mention the more than 30,000 Indian citizens who are in Iran as students or doing business, etc. I presume our embassy must have requested them to leave Iran as soon as possible, because in case of conflict, they would get stuck there and would have no other option but to leave either through Turkey or through Afghanistan, neither of which are very attractive prospects. So
Right.
it's a very difficult situation out there.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And how do you analyze the openness of US and both Iran's in terms of diplomacy? Do you think they have shut that door, or do you think it's still open? If so, then how?
The present American administration under President Trump doesn't believe in diplomacy at all. Their philosophy is old-fashioned imperialism. You have to put pressure and squeeze the weaker states. That is not how diplomacy works. As a diplomat with 40 years in the Foreign Service, I have seen very difficult negotiations, for instance, between the Palestinians and the Israelis many years ago. First, they would be kept in two separate rooms. A negotiator would find a common ground. Then they would come and sit together, etc. There are many ways. The UN knows how to handle all this. The problem is that President Trump has no faith in the UN, has no faith in multilateralism, and he thinks that only by using open military or economic pressure can he bring a weaker state down to its knees. That is actually very detrimental, as I said, to a process of a negotiated settlement. Because most countries would be hesitant to do that, because their own people would abandon them if they think that they have been cowed down by brute force of this kind, a kind of tactic which I thought had gone away with the end of colonialism and imperialism. It has come right back. I call it neo-colonialism and neo-imperialism. Neo-colonialism with regard to Venezuela, and neo-imperialism with regard to other countries. I don't think you can call it diplomacy assuma. This is not a definition of diplomacy. This is not how diplomats define diplomacy. And I don't think that he has too many professional diplomats in his team. They are mainly hardcore, transactional business people who are bringing into diplomacy what they do on a daily basis in business. They strike hard deals, they do a hostile takeover, etc. You can do a hostile takeover in business. You can't take hostile takeover of a country which is a sovereign member of the United Nations with the same rights technically
Yes.
more powerful country has.
And
So,
Ambassador, lastly, Iran has said that it would have been open to the talks only if it was it had no preconditions or stopping them from their nuclear, as they claim that it's a peaceful nuclear, for the civilian use, right? So why is Iran so confident or emboldened about seeing eye to eye with US?
the Iranian program was under IAEA safeguards, which is the procedure, normal procedure when you're using nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, because it's clean energy, although Trump doesn't believe in climate change, and it's supposed to be a substitute for fossil fuels, which are hastening climate change. The Iranians cannot agree to preconditions because what Trump is demanding would be the outcome of a negotiation. In other words, if Trump wants Iran to give up its nuclear program, he has to start a negotiated settlement by which at the end of the deal would be that in return for this, this and this, Iran would give up its nuclear weapon program. That comes at the end of a negotiation. It doesn't come in the beginning of a negotiation. Then there is no negotiation. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You have merely coerced your weaker opponent into a deal. And Iran will not see eye to eye on it. And Iran has already told its neighbors who host American bases that if America attacks Iran from those bases, Iran will attack those countries. Those countries have told the Americans they will not allow the bases on their territory to be used to attack Iran. Why? Because they don't want to get involved in this. And I think if President Trump would take a close look at the geography of the region and the Straits of Hormuz, what on earth would happen to global oil supply if the Iranians, for instance, decide to sink a ship in the middle of the Straits of Hormuz? It would take a couple of months to get it cleared. What would happen to global oil supplies? What would happen to Qatar's oil? It's a very serious situation.
Yes.
He needs to take a geography lesson.
Yes.
To see exactly how critical the situation is if he pushes this too far.
100%.
Up to a certain extent, pressure is all right. But when it becomes coercion, it doesn't work with most sovereign countries. It certainly, if you look at Iran's history through millennia, it's a millennia-old civilization like India.
Yes.
This kind of pressure will never work on it. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we move